My name is Joseph Diapo. I was born in Sudan in 1940. From a family of 7 children. My father is Peter Diapo, and he married Ann Spreitzer, a girl from Ely. And then I'm here today to give a little bit of our family history. It starts with my grandfather, John Diapo. He was born in Tomišľa, Slovenia. And in 1900, John and his wife, Ursula, decided that it would be best for him to come to America to find work, get some money, and then send for them to come back over here. So that's how it all started. At the time when he decided to come to America, his wife had 1 child, and that was John Jr., and she was expecting a 2nd child. So he came over here in 1900. In 1902, his wife and the 2nd child that they were expecting was another boy. His name was Anthony, and we call him Tony Diapo. And she came over with the 2 boys in 1902, and they settled in Sudan, where John was working at the mine. The mine at that time was the Oliver Iron Mining Company. Started in 1884. So John worked in the mine, Grandpa John, until 1929. I have a list of the family that they had. After the first 2 boys, they had another 8 children. John was the oldest. Anthony was next. He married Barbara Nemenich, and he worked in the mine. He was a foreman. And the next in line was Louise. Daughter Louise married Louis Chaboti. Then after Louise was my dad, Peter, in 1904, married Ann Spreitzer from Ely, and he worked in the mine until the mine changed hands and turned over to the state park. He had 39 years, 11 months of service in the Sudan mine. Then his brother Joseph, married to Helen Meir, he worked in the mine, and he also retired when the mine closed. Then came a sister, Angela. She married Frank Planton, and Frank was a miner in Sudan mine also. He retired when the mine transferred to the state park. Then came a brother, Frank. He was in World War II, and after the war, he was moved to Milwaukee, and he married a lady named Olga Kramer. After Frank was a daughter, Mary, born in 1910. She lived to the age of 14. She had died from a problem she had with her heart. And then after Mary came Jacob, which we called Jack. He was also in World War II. And the last child was Frances, born in 1918. She was married to John Nemenich. Now, of all the boys, 4 of them worked in the mine. That was John. John had an accident in the mine where he had a severe blow to the stomach area. And it was a few years later that he passed away, and he was diagnosed as having pancreatic cancer. So he didn't get on a death list from the mining company. And we have Anthony, I said, was the foreman. My dad was a foreman. He was on level 27, and that's where he was the foreman job. He had a close call there at one time when he was making an inspection of the stope. He was in the Montana stope, And he was walking and making a check after the blast had done, and he had some sand sprinkling on his helmet. And he decided, I'm getting out of here. So he ran out of there, and he didn't get very far, and that whole chunk of the ceiling came down. So he had a close call. So getting to Frank and Jacob, they were in World War II. Frank was in the Pacific Theater, and he worked for, or in the office for one of the generals. And Jack, he was a radio man in the airplanes. And his airplane was shot down over the Mediterranean Sea, and he and the crew survived, and they got into a life raft, which they floated around in the Mediterranean for several days before they were rescued. Then getting back with Jack, he was in another plane that was shot down over Holland. And he ended up in a river, and on one side of the river were the enemy, and the other side were the Allies. So he was trying to swim across to the Allied side, and the Germans on the other side were shooting at him. And he was getting away, but finally one of the bullets hit him in the nose, so he had to give himself up. He ended up being a prisoner of war for the rest of the war. When he came back to the States, he was in Milwaukee, and he had a job for a couple of years, and because of all the things that had happened to him as a POW, he had some problems, and he was put in a military hospital in Milwaukee. And he was there for a long time. Nothing helped him. Finally, new medication came, and they tried it on him, and it was like, let's flip the light switch. He was okay. He was able to come home within a year, and he spent the rest of his life living with Angela and Frank Planton and the family until he died. So that's pretty much the family history as they came down. And then I have none of the family mentioned, none of their children worked in a mine because they weren't old enough to get into mine. And most of them were in college and things like that. But my daughter, Stephanie, and son, Jason, both worked at the state park. As daughter, Stephanie was a tour guide, and Jason was working underground, also helping with the shuttling the tour, and also maintenance on surface. And Stephanie was also working with a young girl. Her name was Kelly Dagan. And the two of them were the first women tour guides for the underground mine. So that's a little bit of history for her. And I think I have, then I think we can start going into probably the Stuntz Bay.
Well, I have a couple questions about you, Joe. So what about you and your family under Peter and your mom? Your mom's name was?
My mom was Ann Spreitzer from Ely, and we had 7 children in the family. My brother Peter was the oldest, and I came next, and I had a sister Kathy, who is living in Ely now, and then after Kathy was Marianne and Richard, twins. And there's a story there. When my mother was expecting, my sister was praying for a baby girl, and my brother and I were praying for a baby boy. And we thought, well, we got her outnumbered, 2 to 1. So it's going to be a boy. Well, we were both surprised. My mother had twins, a boy and a girl. That was really funny. Then I have a sister, Margie, who lived in Cloquet, and she's now out in the state of Washington. She moved over there where her daughter is. And after Margie came Patty. And Patty is living over in Pike Bay right now. Yeah.
And then you went on to college, and did you go into teaching right away, or did you work in other areas?
I was too young to find a job because I was the youngest in my class. So when I graduated from high school, I ended up going up to Ely Community College. And most of our family did go to school. My brother Pete was in college for 2 years, and then he ended up being a machinist over at Erie. And I went on to school at UMD and graduated with a degree in business ed. And I became a teacher there. And my history as being a teacher, I student taught in Mountain Iron. And when the school year was over, the superintendent over there came up and see me one morning in the classroom, and he says, "I found a job for you. Are you interested?" And I thought, Mountain Iron, oh, that would have been great. Then he says, "Well, it's at Embarrass." I said, "Oh, not bad. It's close to home." So I didn't even have to look for my first job, which worked out good. And then what happened then is Embarrass School had the largest enrollment of all the county schools, but there was consolidation talk going that they were going to move the kids to Babbitt and Tower, and because Babbitt had 3 schools and 2 of them were going to be empty. So I was thinking, well, I'd get a job in Babbitt, but it would only be 1 year because they had 2 business teachers over there already. So then what happened after that was I got a phone call the night at the end of March, and it was Herbie Lampa. And he says, "The business teacher Tower, Ed Urich, is transferring to Aurora. If you're interested, write a letter of application for the job in Tower." So I did. The next morning, Tower School got 2 letters. One was a resignation and one was an application for hire. Well, I did get the job, but I didn't know until it was 2 weeks before school started. So I had 2 jobs at one time because I was teaching at an Embarrass, and I had to call the superintendent and see if I could get relieved from that job. And he says, "Well, it so happens we have a man from Ely who wants to get closer to home to help his mother. She's not doing too well health-wise." So he says, "No problem." So then I got to teach in Tower. That was one of the most exciting and memorable times in my life, to get a job in Tower, because I was so proud of our Tower school, and to be a teacher there was unbelievable at that time to me. So I ended up teaching 29 years in Tower.
Who were some of the teachers that you taught with during those years?
I had Mr. McCumber was a shop teacher. I was Herbie Lampa was a math teacher, and Bob Hash, he was teaching in business and library, and there was Paul Pischler, he was elementary, and there's a whole bunch more. But yeah, that was a group. I was in there, I came in there right after, like, Ed Urich left, and there were a few other teachers that left all at the same time.
Was Betty Isles?
Doug Paget, and I think Harvey Isles had passed away, and his wife was teaching.
Yeah, I think it was Betty, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Betty Isles.
And Frank Franson was also teaching in Tower at the time. He was a science biology teacher. And I got along good with Frank, and we ended up him teaching me how to be a carpenter. And we spent our summers working together on buildings around the lake. And it was a fun time. Frank was another real good friend.
And Terry Brownell was the superintendent. And
Yeah, Terry Brownell was our superintendent, and he was very good with the teachers. And Ernie Mussonin was also there as a principal. And there was a great group of people there in Tower.
Good school.
That's why I was happy to get back there. I had a 9-year vacation and I was back in school again. Yeah.
So growing up in Tower-Soudan, what was it like?
In Tower-Soudan, it was kids that got out in the morning and went and find things to do for themselves. And we were lucky in my neighborhood. There was this person. She was a tomboy, I guess. She taught us how to make rubber guns and slingshots and shoot guns and all this. And when she got into junior high school, she got more interested in boys, other boys, and we couldn't believe that she was going to leave us. But she was quite a character. I remember we had boxing gloves that my dad got from one of the other miners, and we would box out in the yard, and Aggie would be there with us, and here this big boy from down the block, he was a step-in boy, comes up there and he wanted to box, and all of us boys were afraid that he's so big. So Aggie says, I'll take him on. She's put on the gloves and 2 punches, and the big guy was going home with a nosebleed. She was our protector too.
What was her name? Can you remember?
She was Aggie Pavlich,
Oh.
and she married my cousin Tony, Anthony Pavlich, Anthony Apple. So she stayed in the family. Yeah, that was a fun time when we were kids. And
So who were some of your buddies that you hung around with in Sudan?
well, my neighbor Nick Techhouse was with us all the time, and then his brother Eddie, and there was my brother Pete, and then our cousins Frank and Ray Planton, and the other neighborhood kids. We had Johnny Zabodnik, and they were pretty much our clan. And then we were like in groups, and then from the southern part of Sudan, there was a group, and you know, we had little skirmishes every once in a while, and with rubber gun fights and stuff like that. But it was fun, and we learned to do our thing. Stuntz Bay became a part of our life early, where we would do our fishing down there when our fathers weren't taking us out.
So did you walk down the hill to go fishing?
Okay. When we started fishing down at Stuntz Bay, we were fishing with my dad, and he had an old trailer and a boat, rowboat with a small motor, and when he was busy fishing with his partner, Matt Vessel, we as kids would walk down to Stuntz Bay, and at that time, we walked down a clearing where the old steam pipe went up the hill. In the earlier days, the kids that went down the lake, they walked on the steam pipe. It was like a sidewalk. It was a smooth, and they got down there early in the spring and late in the fall to swim, because that steam plant had a outlet of warm water going in, so the water was always warm there. So they did run up and down that hill on that pipe. But when we were kids, the pipe was gone. But when we were on the lake fishing with my dad, we were talking about that straight line where the trees were cleared, and he says, you know, when the pipe was there, it was black, and the people called that the ink line, I-N-K line, because it looked like a big black line on the hill. So that pipeline was called the ink line. So we used to walk down that hill, and then the road that goes off as you come down to the Stuntz Bay Landing, the road that cuts off to the east, where it intersects the road that comes along the shoreline, that's about as far as the boathouses went when we were kids. From that point on, there was a trail to Big Rock and to Fisherman's Dock. And a lot of kids fished there, and a lot of adults also. And fishing was always good, and the one that could cast the bobber out the furthest got the biggest fish. Yeah. Then after the boathouses, well, I'll get back to the boathouses. The first boathouse down there was all our iron mining company's boathouse, and they had a boat in there that the tender would use to go out on the lake to clean the inlet of the water line that came into the steam plant. If you look from the landing in Stuntz Bay, you see a marker buoy out. The first one is a rock pile, and the further one out that's next towards the islands is where this pipe that fed the water to the plant, the inlet was way out there. So they needed that boat to go and keep the things from plugging the pipe up. So that's why they had the boathouse. Now, all the rest of the boathouses down there came in after that one, all the way to the west end, and then just east of the steam plant. Then that's the only road they had at that time. To get a lot, it was a gift to the miner, from the mine, all our mining company, to the miners. They could just sign up in the office for a lot, and they were designated a spot, and they just added on one at a time until they filled all the slots. And it didn't cost a penny, and eventually they had power, electricity to all the boathouses. So they had lights, and then if they had batteries to charge for their boat motors, they could do that. And in the early days, the boathouses in the spring was a gathering place for a lot of people, because they would go down there and get ready for going out to their cabins and get ready for fishing season. And the women would join, and some even brought ironing boards down there and were ironing their clothes and visiting. And that was also a time when Judd Bruno, who was the deliverer of fuel at that time, he would come down on those Saturdays when the people were gathering, and every boathouse had at least 2 50-gallon barrels, and everybody would fill up their barrels for the gas supply for the rest of the season. So that worked out nice. Yeah. And eventually, I'll say, I don't know how many people know this, but there is still one of the original buildings still in use down there at Stuntz Bay.
Which one is that?
It happened to be, if you want to look for it, if you go to the Stuntz Bay landing and go east, past the parking lot, and there's a clump of trees in there, you see a foundation in there from where a building was. Well, early on, there was a miner by the name of Frank Opecha. He moved that building over on cribs over the shoreline, and he converted it into a boathouse. And to tell which boathouse is the one, you look at the boathouses, and the one that has a cupola on the roof, that's the original building that was with the steam plant. So that's a little bit of history. I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't know that.
No, I've not heard that story.
Yeah. So then eventually all the boathouses were extended to the east end, and I would say by mid-1960s, all of the lots down there were taken. So the only way to get a lot was if you could buy one from somebody when they sold it. So that's how that worked.
So when did your family get the boathouse?
My dad never did have a boathouse, but in the late 50s, my cousin and I had Tony Apple get a lot for us down there. So this was about the time in 62 when or 58, I think I got out of high school. I started college, and my brother and my cousin commandeered my boathouse lot, and they built their boathouse on that. So I didn't get a boathouse until I graduated from college. And a fellow by the name of Bernie Anderson, he lost his job because the mine closed down in that period of time when I was in college. So he was planning on selling his boathouse and his home. He was going to move to Hibbing and become a student to be a math teacher. So I was lucky I got his boathouse in 1962. I paid $1,100 for it. I got a boathouse, a 16-foot aluminum clap boat, a 25-horse electric start motor, and a duck hunting boat for $1,100.
What a deal.
That was my first purchase after I started teaching, before I even bought a car. That's how important the lake was to me. Yeah. And I still have that boathouse. And I had to do some repairs and remodeling on it, and after that, a lot of people down there didn't want to go in the water to fix their boathouses, so that's how I got into fixing boathouses with my partner, Nick Techouts.
What was the biggest job about repairing a boathouse? What part of it?
Well, when you're repairing a boathouse, first, the boathouses that were built early weren't very tall. The headroom was under 6 feet, and the bays, they call them, or I call them the slips, were for small boats. So our first jobs were usually trying to make the boathouse channels wider, the slips wider, so that the bigger boats could get in there. And then the bigger boats had windshields and canvas tops, and they usually lift them up out of the water for winter time for storage. Well, they had no headroom, so some of the boathouses we had to raise the roof, raise them higher. But mostly it's crib work and new stringers that have to be replaced because they're in the water, out of the water, and they deteriorate faster. But every boathouse was pretty much along that line. Some are different, some were further gone than others, and then getting back to the boathouses, we didn't lose them, but we had 3 that got damaged this last winter, the winter of 24, 25. They were built to the lake side of the road by this old steam plant area, and they heated the water with coal in the early days, and the waste from the coal, some called it ashes, but it really isn't ashes. We call them clinkers, the slag, the clinkers. They're just hard, sharp objects. They were dumped in the lake across from the steam plant. Well, these boathouses that are built over there on that clinker pile, the foundation down below isn't good, so the ice can move those boathouses easy. So there were 3 of them, they got pushed back and the cribs were knocked out. And I remember Jim Hill had one of those boathouses, Jim Hill Sr., and he was saying that every so many years they have to add cribbing to the top of the cribs because they were sinking in that clinker pile. I often wondered, how do those kids swim down there on that bottom? So they must have been swimming with shoes on, because they would have had their feet to cut up, I think. But yeah, that was a problem, and it's still a problem down there. Now, from the Stuntz Bay Landing to the west end, it gets muddy, worse. So the end boathouses on the west end, you could take a stick and poke it down in the mud, it'd go down 3 feet easy. So when we had to work down there on those cribs, we couldn't get in there and walk in the mud. We didn't know how far we were going to go down. So I kind of figured out on one of the jobs, I says, I don't know how to do this, but we took 2 sheets of tin off the wall of the boathouse, laid them in the water, and had a rope tied to each one so we could retrieve them when we were done. And we were able to walk over the mud without sinking in. So those kinds of things we had to figure out, you know, for these boathouses. From the Stuntz Bay to the east, it's more of a hard pan bottom. It's clay and rock. So the cribbing over time they'll sink down maybe 3 or 4 inches. That's about it. And so those were easy to work on. You didn't have to have tin to walk on.
Well, when the boathouses were originally built, a lot of the materials were like tamarack trees and things from, you know, the woods.
Yes.
So when you're putting in cribs, new cribs now, what kind of material do you use?
Well, when the boathouses were first started, they used just trees and round logs for the cribbing. Mm-hmm. And when they put the cribbing in, the ones that are out in the lake, they had 2 long poles on the bottom that were the width of the boathouse. And on each end, they would build the cribbing. Mm-hmm. So they were all tied together. So the ice didn't push them because they were solid. But now when we repair, you're just repairing one side, usually. And the progression was from round logs they had, and then they used nails to nail them together. Then after that, they were using, well, they were still in the round logs, but then they were drilling holes in the corners. And they were using what they called trolley cable. That was from the mine. The early mine had steam-operated equipment. Then they had battery-operated. Then when they got electricity, they had copper cables that the trolleys were hooked to for power. Well, when those wore down, then they would bring them up to the surface, and got people building boathouses use those copper rods to in the corners of the cribs to hold them together. So when they built the crib, as they were going up, they wanted to float. So you had a floor in the crib and you put rocks inside to hold them. And then just enough so that you could probably move them around. And when you got them in place, then you'd fill them up. And that kept the cribbing and made them more stable. So then on top of that, we had stringers that ran from the crib to the shoreline, and those were usually trees cut on the hill across the road. And the popular tree was the Highland spruce. It didn't take long for all of them to disappear. So then they had to do other things, and then as the years went, replacements were power line poles from the power companies, and now they're using 8x8 treated timbers that you buy from the lumber yard. So the things have changed. They're easier to work with, easier to get the floors level and things like that. So yeah, it's changed a lot.
So I have a question. You know, you look at the boathouses and you see so many short doors. Why was every door so small?
You know, I always thought maybe it was because the miners are so short, and they were short because they were stooped down in the tunnels in the mine. But then I was thinking also because maybe it had to do with the tin that they were using for the walls. They were only so long. And so there could be a number of reasons why they were. And the boats are small. When they lifted them out of the water, they didn't need the height, because the new ones have tops and all that. So yeah, that probably why. And you know, they only had rowboats, so they didn't. Getting to boats, I remember we were as kids, and all of a sudden there were these boats on the lake that were really speeding along faster than all the other boats, and they happened to be little dumpy cedar strip boats with 8 horse or 10 horsepower mercury outboards on them, and they were so light, and the little motor got them to plane off, and they were zipping back and forth. There were 3 or 4 of those. And then the progression went to guys like Johnny Aronson and Dick Rubin and the Dragabons. they had these 22 horsepower Evinrudes, the ones with the wheel on the top with the pull cord. They were the speed of the lake at that time. And they would cruise around in groups, you know, and tour the lakes and look for girls and whatever in the summer. And then the next group of boats that came were Thompson boats. They had runabouts with a middle deck and a front deck, and they had the 25 horsepower Evinrudes or Johnsons. And guys like Dickie Lydia and Spoler and those guys, that was Eddie Jutinen, and they had that class. They were the next speed. Now you go on a lake, you see pontoon boats going over 40 miles per hour, loaded with people. And they got maybe 200-300 horsepower motors on the back of those, so it's changed a lot out there. Yeah.
So you probably spent a great amount of time then on the water.
Well, in my family, the girls, my mother took care of them, and she made sure that all 4 daughters had piano lessons. And my dad's job was taking care of the 3 boys. So we did a lot of fishing and hunting. And the fishing mostly ended by the end of May. So, and all our fishing was pretty much in Stuntz Bay in those days. And I had one of the most memorable fishing days in my life when I was a kid, and I was fishing with my dad and Matt Vessel. And he had his favorite spot in Stuntz Bay. There's a rock jutting out, and when he anchored there, he had his back of the boat towards the shoreline. And the other anchor was out away from the shoreline. And he always had that spot because the fish came around the shore, you know, and he got most of the fish back there. So we were out there fishing, Matt and my dad and I, and it was getting time to when the fish would start biting, and I was getting bored up there in the front of the boat, and I started playing with the anchor, you know, lifting up and my fishing pole, and all of a sudden I caught a fish. Oh man, I got another one. And then I wiggled the anchor some more, and I got another fish. Eventually I got the limit for 3 people. My dad and his partner didn't catch a single fish. And I wouldn't tell them what I was doing because I was having so much fun. But you know, that anchor was stirring the mud, and the fish came over there looking what was causing it. And there was my minnow. And I caught fish.
Oh, so that's the secret.
Yeah, that was the most memorable fishing day I ever had. Outfished 2 pros. Yeah. And then, you know, that happened more than once. So there was something to it, because I fished on Trout Lake with my son one day, and we anchored in deep water, and we had only 1 anchor, and he was by the anchor, and he caught all the fish. So whenever the fish weren't biting, we'd kind of stir the water up a little bit. My dad would take the motor, you know, a trolling motor, and he'd go up and down the shoreline. And then we'd start fish trolling in there, and we'd start catching fish. So that's my secret for how to catch fish. I'm not going to give you any more secrets. But yeah, we spent a lot of time out there.
So when you talk about your mom she was Slovenian also?
Yes.
And so did she cook some Slovenian foods for the family that were favorites of yours as kids, or you carried on your adulthood?
Yeah, my mother came from a family of 14 kids. My dad's side had 10. But yeah, we used to have potica and all these Slovenian foods at home, you know. Yeah, she was a great cook. I remember one time my dad was talking to her, he says, "You mean you spent the whole check on food this month?" And she kind of says, "No, sorta." And she was helping out a sister of hers in Michigan, the youngest one in the family, I guess, and they were having trouble, so my mother would send some grocery money to her so they could have clothes and stuff. My mother had a big heart.
So what did your mom and dad do their grocery shopping in Tower?
Yeah, and when we were growing up, Gornick's had the store where the mortuary is now. And the girls that worked in the store would come around to the houses and take the orders. And then the next day, the store would deliver to the houses. And the same thing with the dairy, they delivered right to the house, to their milk. So then they didn't have to go to town to shop because, well, most of the women didn't work and they didn't drive. And the husbands were busy all day working in the mines. So that's how they got accommodated by the businesses in town. So it worked out fine.
Mm-hmm. Was that in the 1940s, 50s?
Yeah, that'd be about the time. Mm-hmm.
Did your mom ever learn how to drive?
My mom never drove.
No?
No. They didn't, really, there weren't the cars, you know. I remember my dad had a 37 Ford. And then there was a car that was shared between him and his partner, Matt Vessel, because Matt didn't have a car. And then Matt's wife was in the hospital for a long time, so he would use the car to go to Virginia to see her. And then on Sunday, when it was time for church, my dad would take half the family and go to first Mass. And then Matt would take the car and take his family and my mother and take them to church for the second Mass. So that car was pretty busy. Yeah, and they had worked out a pretty good plan. Yeah. So I don't know, do you want more information for the Stuntz Bays?
Yeah, what else can you tell us about Stuntz Bay? The Stuntz Bay boathouses.
Like I said, the lots are still held out and they're all free and electricity was free. The boathouses, like I said, the change in the way the materials changed as time went by. And the thing about the boathouses now is that there's, in my last count, there's at least 15 that are out of use completely. And when I was a secretary for the Stuntz Bay Association for years, I tried to get Mr. Winarka and then Mr. Essick to let us go down there and fix them up, salvage them. But we never got permission to do that. But well, I was always thinking, heck, they could get lease money from those, you know, and rent them out, and it would preserve that picture of the historic site. And now when you look from the lake, you see all these boats falling down, boathouses falling in the water, and they're not cleaning them up. So, I don't know.
And the electricity was cut off when the mine closed in 1962.
When the mine closed, they took the power off too. Yeah, that was a time when everybody kind of missed that. The only way you could have power down there now is with a generator or with batteries, solar panels. You know, some of them have solar panels to lift their doors. And then these roll-up doors, I was the first one to have a roll-up door down there, and I think we installed about 5 or 6 more after, and now there's a bunch of them down there that have the roll-up door. Before they had the door that pivoted, or the doors that swung out like barn doors. And now they're starting to get, the ones that are still down there are putting in roll-up doors. Now in my boathouse I have a generator that I use to lift my boat up and down. But now I'm thinking my door is getting heavy to lift. So I think I'm gonna hook up a chain hoist type deal so I can lift my door up.
We have solar, so just press a button and it goes.
Yeah, there are a few of those that have the solar. In fact, the house that I'm working on now for my granddaughters, um, my daughter's husband is going to have solar powered, and he's going to have them so that when he's coming in from the lake, he pushes a button and the doors will open from the solar. Yeah,
Make
yeah.
it easy.
It's. I think he sees some of the things I have in my boathouse because I have a electric motor that lifts my boat up. And I don't think there are very many of those down there. But it was interesting on working in boathouses too because there were so many different ideas of how the people would raise their boats up. The types of pulleys and the cranks, and the most interesting lift I've seen in all the years with working boathouses was out in Bayview at the Catola's property. He was a lawyer. Okay, they had this big boathouse, and they had this big mechanism. You would think it was a Swiss watch with all the gears and stuff, and that he used to lift his boat up. And that's the most interesting one I've seen. But yeah, there's all kinds of ideas down there. It's interesting, you know, how people think. No two alike.
Well, the boathouses are important to the families that own them
Yeah.
because of the legacy to the mine and to the miners. So
Well-
it's something that we want to keep working
Right.
towards keeping.
Most of the first boathouses were built by the Finnish people that worked in the mine, the Scandinavians. I imagine because their homeland reminded them a lot of, or this land here, of their homeland. So they had the cabins out there in Mud Creek and on the islands, Armstrong, and they wanted to shuttle back and forth without hauling a boat with a trailer, you know. So they were the first ones to build the boathouses down there.
Well, many of the cabins were built on land that was owned previously by the Oliver Mining Company or U.S. Steel that the miners could buy, couldn't they? Isn't that all? So many ended up on islands because it was mining company property? Is that true?
I'm not sure on that, but I know in Armstrong that they leased the land from U.S. Steel.
That's right.
That would have been like the Palos, the Kiwa Snyder, and Doc Pahula. So when that land was turned over to the state park, the leases were terminated and they had to remove all the cabins.
Yeah, that was sad.
But the rest of the lake, I'm not sure how that worked. I know the U.S. Steel land went way over into Mud Creek, but I'm not sure about the islands.
I know Hillard Larson got a piece of land from U.S. Steel, you know, that bay,
Okay,
that little,
all
that
right.
Little Narrows from U.S. Steel
Was it a lease or a purchase?
purchase.
Okay. Yeah, there was quite a few out on an island, and they needed the boathouses. So I think someday it's going to be a problem for the people that are out on islands. It's going to be like what's happening at Moccasin Point now. Because all the people that go from Moccasin Point to their places on Ely Island, etc., now there's going to be a parking problem. And they're going to have to start looking elsewhere to park their cars. So times make things worse sometimes instead of better. I guess we're spoiled because the U.S. Steel gave us so much.
Yeah, Sudan was populated with a lot of kids because that's where the miners and their families lived
Hmm.
in Sudan. So I remember Sudan had all these kids that you didn't know until you went to 7th grade, and all of a sudden there's a whole new slew of kids. You know, we're only 2 miles apart.
Yeah.
You didn't really know the kids in Sudan unless you're related. You know,
Yeah,
Tower.
there was pretty much the north side and the south side. Up on the hill and down below. Yeah. I remember when I started teaching in Tower, I'd say over 75% of the kids in the school were from Tower or Sudan. And the others came from Lake 77, from the lake, and from Eagle's Nest. Eventually it got to be fewer and fewer in town, and more out in the countryside. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what year did you retire from teaching?
Oh, let's see. 90, 96, I think it was.
Did you retire like on the Rule of 80 or one of those programs?
Yes, they had the rule of 80 for a couple of years, but then they took that away from us, and then I was under the rule of 90. So it would be my age plus the number of years I taught. So I taught 34 years. I had 5 at Embarrass and 29 in Tower. Yeah.
So teaching
I've
was
been-
a
I've
good,
been-
good
I-
profession.
I've been retired for a few years now.
Yeah. And enjoying life.
Yeah.
But teaching was a good profession for you?
I enjoyed it. I loved working with kids, and I tried very hard to be fair and honest to all the kids. No favorites. My kids, when I had them in school, and my sisters, I treated them just like the rest of the kids. I didn't want them to be picked on. But yeah, and it worked out. And the kids were just great. Maybe one once in a while there was a troublemaker. I remember one I had, he was from the lake, Birch Point, and I don't want to mention his name, but he was one of those that was kind of like a little troublemaker. Well, anyhow, I was teaching business law, and he was in the class, and that was for half a year. And every day he would come there trying to find a loophole around the law. So we had him, and he actually made the class because all the other kids were waiting to see if he was going to get me. So he was straight A. The next semester, I had economics. Just the opposite. He didn't get A's anymore. He had a heck of a time just to pass. But he loved that law. And he was trying to get me, but he got the whole class involved. So I really appreciated him for that. He was a good kid, even though he was a troublemaker. Yeah, that was fun teaching. And I coached a lot too. I had a junior high and assistant basketball. We had pretty good teams. I coached with Scott Gernander when he was here, and Laverne Byers, and yeah. I think I learned from them, and I think they learned a lot from me, because I had a pretty good team going into junior high, and I'd see Scott Gernander over there watching me, and then I'd go watch a high school ball game, and I'd say, "Hey, those are my plays." Which was good, because my kids were ready for him then when they got there. We always had good basketball teams.
Yeah, those are good years, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, even before my time in Tower, when I was going to school there were always good teams. And a small school, we had top-notch swimming teams too at the same time.
Yeah, so the Tower-Soudan Golden Eagles are no more when the consolidation and breaking up of the Tower School happened. So that was kind of a sad day for or alumni.
Yeah, it is. I hated to see our school go, the high school. But, you got to have kids. I remember going to Sealy to visit my grandmother. She says, well, how many kids do you have, Joe? I got 2. Well, how are you going to keep your job if you don't have more kids? And that's what it ended up being, eventually.
So growing up in Tower-Soudan, was it a good experience growing up in a small town? What are your thoughts on that?
In a way, in most ways, it was good because you knew all the kids and you got along pretty much with everybody, and it was like one big family. But the bad part about it is in a smaller school, you don't have the opportunities to do it in a big school. Your options, in sports and in classes you take and things like that. Nowadays, I'm surprised, that these kids that are graduating from high school, a lot of them have 2 years of college classes already, but that wasn't a problem when we were growing up. But like my granddaughter, my son's older daughter graduated this year from Duluth East, and she's already got 2 years of college, and she's really an outstanding person, student. She's a go-getter. I think she was the top of her class this year. Anyhow, she and 3 of her friends got together and decided that they needed some solar panels at the school. So Kate was down in the cities talking to the legislature looking for grants. She got it. And then that wasn't enough. These 4 girls got together and they started contacting other schools. Now there are about 7 or 8 schools that got grants for solar panels. So then she's got people from all over telling her, well, when you're through with school, you'll have a job with us if you want.
That's great.
So see, in a bigger school, they have more chance to do stuff like that.
And then one more question. The whistle in Sudan. Do you remember growing up with the noon whistle and the 9 o'clock whistle? And do you know the story behind that?
I really don't know the story behind that. I think it had to do with signaling when it was lunchtime. And like for school now, we walked from northern end of Sudan to the school, and then we'd go home at lunchtime, and then back. So we made that trip 4 times a day. So that whistle signified that this is lunchtime. And I remember I used to run home and from the school and had the shorts cut through the monument area and there. And I'd get home there maybe only about 3 or 4 minutes after 12 o'clock. But yeah. And then at 9 o'clock, I think, was a curfew. A reminder for the kids to go home. Mm-hmm. It was dark then, and yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty unique to Sudan, is to have the noon and the 9 o'clock whistle blowing. I know for a number of years it was not operating, and it was really missed. Mm-hmm. So the city or the township got some grants to get it fixed, and it's up and operating again. So it's back in operation.
Yeah, I can't remember now if I think the whistle might be working now.
Yeah, it's working now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been working for a year or 2 now. Yeah.
Yeah. Things are changing and some things aren't. People get used to that, they want to have it.
Right. Yeah. It was missed when it wasn't working, that's for sure.
Yeah.
so anything else? You want to wrap it up and with anything that you need to say?
Yeah, I think that we've said pretty much what I was planning to say, and if something else comes up, you could probably add it on later, another time.
Well, thanks for your time today. This is great.
You're welcome. I enjoyed being here.
Good. Yeah.
You're a good host.
See how easy it was?